know her because I'm the Avatar.
This is an unusual topic for me, as I'm a proud hardcore gamer that only talks about the abdominal muscles of Leon Kennedy and Clive Rossfield. But Avatar: The Last Airbender just got a live-action adaptation courtesy of the greediest streaming company Netflix, and it's released to... reviews? A live-action adaptation of any property is usually worse than the original source material, with some minor exceptions. And now, the cycle continues once again with Avatar. Avatar: The Last Airbender is a beloved animated adventure cartoon that aired on Nickelodeon, while Avatar: The Last Airbender is a watered-down live-action series that fails to capture the fun energy of the original, as well as having less interesting versions of the original likable characters. The Last Airbender is a hilariously bad live-action film from 2010, directed by M. Night Shyamalan, but we're not talking about that. It's bad though.
Are you an airbender boy?
Leave him alone!
Critically, Netflix's Avatar is getting around average reviews. The general impression I gather is that it's not as much of a disaster as the Cowboy Bebop series or the 2010 movie, but it still doesn't compare to the original series. Elsewhere on the internet, you'll find a bunch of people dunking on the series with awkward clips and scenes from the show that don't really highlight the actual flaws. Don't get me wrong, it's not great overall, but I haven't seen all that many people express why it isn't great. So here I go. I want to make a disclaimer that it's been a week since the show's been released, and I'm only talking about the episodes I've watched, which is the first half of the season, consisting of 4 episodes. The second half of the season could very well be amazing, but the quality of those episodes won't change the criticism I have with these first 4, and I highly doubt that they'll be a significantly higher quality, but keep that in mind. Every scene feels like there's a blanket of CGI covering it, kind of reminding me of the visuals you would expect from a mediocre modern superhero movie. In some scenes, it feels like everything is coated with green screen, and most of the scenes in the show seem like they take place at 6 p.m. with overcast sunsets. So far, I can barely recall a single scene that had a bright sunny day, which feels intentional to try and hide the shoddy CGI with dim lighting. If you want to compare the live-action series and how faithful it is, there are many deviations regarding plot elements, how episodes play out, and how characters are introduced into the show. I don't really have a problem with changes like this, as change with any adaptation is inevitable. I commend the series for the direction they took, trying to combine the introduction of characters and stories in the same episode. On paper, it's a fine idea, and the right way to tackle the series, since you have to make changes in order to adapt 20 episodes of the animated series into 8 episodes of the live action, even if the live action episodes are longer. But the execution of that leaves a lot to be desired. Aside from just inaccuracies with the source material or bad CGI, there are genuine issues that plague the show that I think would be a fair criticism of any other show. These problems are ones that I think even brand new viewers can notice, without having ever seen the original series or knowing nothing about it. I won't do a deep dive into every single scene and moment, as I'm sure there'll be a 6-hour-long video essay that does that, but I do want to highlight some scenes that stood out to me, what they're lacking, and how these issues don't exist in the original series. Again, I'm not using the original as a complaint of the live action series being different. These scenes from the live action series are just not very good on their own, and the original series is being used as an example for one way in which they could be done well. It doesn't mean it's the only way, and if changes are going to be made, it's important to understand what worked about the original before you take a different approach with it. The live action show opens with a different scene introducing the air nomads and the invasion of the Fire Nation before Aang is swept away by the storm, and then we're introduced to Katara, whereas the original show starts right here and saves Aang's backstory for later. The prologue of the live action series is more or less brand new, while also taking some elements from a later episode. So we'll start with Sokka and Katara. In the live action show, we immediately see Sokka being a leader to the younger kids of the tribe before he tells Katara they need to go fishing, and she says a joke that was delivered very awkwardly and unconvincingly. While we see that Sokka is taking on the role of a leader, we're not shown anything of Katara yet. Once they're actually on the boat, we see Sokka criticize Katara for bending water, while she admits that she's not good at it. They get in a minor argument about war and helping the village, and then they get caught in a strong water stream, and boom, they're at the iceberg. While these two small scenes do show the leadership role that Sokka has taken, they really don't highlight very much about his personality or the relationship he has with Katara. Meanwhile, Katara is just kind of depicted as a loser who's embarrassed of her waterbending skills, and yeah, that's basically what we get from her. It's not overtly offensive so far, but it's a bit dull and not very engaging. In the animated show, we're immediately given insight into the personalities of Sokka and Katara. The dialogue between them is much more playful, and they sound familiar with one another.
Look, I'm just saying that if I had weird powers, I'd keep my weirdness to myself.
You're calling me weird? I'm not the one who makes muscles at myself every time I see my reflection in the water.
It immediately tells you that these characters are familiar with each other and enjoy being around each other, even though Sokka pokes fun at Katara's bending and are lecturing about their culture. Then they're quickly swept up by what I assume to be the same stream as the live action. This is a minor example, but it's the first and most obvious one. In the original, the introduction to the world is done through Katara's narration. She's our guide to this world, and we find Aang the same time she does. We're introduced to the Avatar the way our characters are. In the live action show, not only are we missing a moment between two siblings that highlights their personalities, but we also lose a great introduction to the world and to Aang, as we're told everything we need to know about Aang's backstory in the first 20 minutes of the live action show, rather than being naturally shown his personality before more of his story is introduced later. The biggest problem with the live action series is the constant breaking of the rule: show, don't tell. While we are shown the beginning of the invasion of the Fire Nation, we're then immediately told everything we need to know about Aang's personality and backstory. We're shown that Sokka has to be a leader for his tribe, but then immediately we're told that again by Sokka as he talks to Katara, and we're told that Katara's waterbending isn't very good. In the original show, in the same amount of time it takes to tell us all that information, we're told about the history of the world in 1 minute, and then we're introduced to the personalities of Sokka, Katara, and Aang, and then we get to see their personalities and characters shine through in the first episode, rather than being told almost everything we need to know about them. You don't have to compare the original animated series to highlight that the dialogue and pacing of the live action series is heavily expository and clunky, but the comparison just makes it look much worse. The poor characterization and personality is also hurt by how gloomy and dour the live action series is. It's not egregious, but the show feels like it's desperately trying to be seen as the mature, epic Game of Thrones adaptation of Avatar. So how do we show that? Let's just show someone get incinerated live within the first 5 minutes. It feels so desperately like it wanted to be respected for being dark and mature, but the lack of engagement and fun is present in the whole show, and it's most noticeable within the fight choreography. I can understand wanting to maybe look at the series from a more mature angle, but I don't think that should result in fights and action scenes being less inventive than the original series. While I want to keep my criticism directly at the new series without comparing the old one too much, this is an issue that needs to be addressed. A lot of the action in the new series is held back by a lack of meaningful choreography for the different elements. Each element was designed with specific martial arts in mind, and you don't feel that distinction as much in the newer series. There are some shots where Aang looks like he's just doing waterbending, when in fact he's supposed to be airbending. This is nitpicking a little, but as an airbender, Aang should be moving around quickly and dancing around his opponents. The fight between Aang and King Boomy is kept in the live action series, and that's a lot less interesting than the animated counterpart. There's not as many unique abilities and moments, and the moments that are kept are just filmed much worse. The shots and framing are awkward, facial expressions can look silly, and it just lacks the energy and tension of the original.
Especially your friends.
You can see the great difference between a master airbender and earthbender. And again, this scene's just fun and energetic. The live action scene's forgettable and completely loses the creativity of Aang as a fighter. He's not just a talented airbender, he always tries to defeat his enemies by being quick or clever. This isn't even diving into how boring this episode is as a whole, or how Boomy is now a boring, grumpy asshole who's not interesting, intelligent, or fun anymore. But let's not dwell on that and stay focused. I will say that one decent highlight for the live action series is this little fight between Aang and Zuko in a crowded market in episode 3. It's not amazing, but it has a nice energy and playfulness to it that actually makes it fun. There's a cute little joke where a woman intervenes and starts hitting Zuko for attacking a child.
How dare you hit that child!
I liked that. It was cute, but there's not many moments like this. Moving on to another moment that was directly adapted is Iroh being captured prisoner. There's a moment where one of Iroh's captors starts monologuing to him about his siege at Ba Sing Se and the awful effects that it had on one of his loved ones. It's a nice bit of tension and it adds a little bit of history for Iroh's character, as not much is known about him or Zuko's backstory at this point in the show. The scene ends with the character making a comment about how Iroh could never understand the pain or loss he felt. It's a decent scene that isn't directly adapted from the original. In the original, it also introduces the idea of Iroh's siege of Ba Sing Se, but it's played off much more playfully without giving much insight into Iroh's regret and failure.
I acknowledge my defeat at Ba Sing Se. After 600 days away from home, my men were tired, and I was tired.
Showing one of the soldiers express hatred and then ending on a dour note is a bit on the nose, but it provides a bit of intrigue into Iroh. What is he looking sad about? Clearly there's more to his story, and he's possibly more sympathetic to the Earth Kingdom than what we're led to believe. Okay, wait, never mind. Yep, the live action series just immediately hard cuts from "you wouldn't understand Lost" to immediately showing us the funeral of Iroh's nephew who died during the Siege of Ba Sing Se, showing that yes, Iroh does in fact understand Lost. Did you get that? He understands it. Why would you show this? This scene adds nothing. We can already tell by Iroh's face how he's feeling. This is one of the benefits of live action that animation can't replicate. A good actor can tell us what a character is thinking simply by showing us their face. Why? Why would you undermine this actor's performance and this scene by immediately explaining to us what Iroh's backstory is? They didn't even give time for intrigue to build, not even for the rest of the episode. Nope. This may not stand out on its own, but it's just another example of telling, not showing. This show has such little faith in the audience's intelligence that it immediately has to explain everything at all times. Nothing is left to grow or develop. These characters don't need to go through character arcs. Let's just speedrun them and explain everything. No need for intrigue.
Look, it's
Interesting characters with arcs and personality.
Let's keep flying.
The only highlight is that there's a great moment between Iroh and Zuko where they get to talk and bond.
Lu Ten never needed it because he was the strongest person I knew.
There's so much that's holding this show back, and a lot of it is unrelated to the original. It's just very sloppy when judged on its own merits. I could go on since I think every scene that's taken from the animated series could be unfavorably compared, and you'd likely find either a reduction in fun or nuance from every moment, but you get the point. The live action series is too faithful to the original show, not able to offer anything completely new or interesting, like brand new stories, settings, or characters. I'd like to see more scenes like the guard that talked to Iroh about his perspective of the siege, but at the same time, the show isn't faithful enough to the original, resulting in every direct scene and moment feeling like a watered-down discount alternative. It's not at all garbage like the live-action movie, but it's still far from the quality of the animated series. The Netflix show feels like it didn't know what it wanted, and should have either focused on adapting the series more accurately with characters that feel more like their original counterparts, or focus on a brand new story altogether. I don't care if they even cut out some of the main cast of characters. If it meant offering a brand new story with an entirely different journey, it at least would have been more interesting. It's stuck in this awkward middle ground. On the flip side, the show does have a highlight in Prince Zuko. Rather than feeling like a dumbed-down version of the original portrayed by Dante Basco, Dallas Liu does a pretty great job with the character, and his writing feels noticeably stronger than the rest of the cast. It almost feels like every scene with Zuko was written by a different team. One could argue that I only think it's good because it most closely resembles the original show, and I'm biased, but yeah, it's like what I said before. The show would benefit by either being much more faithful or much less. Zuko feels like the only part of the show that knew the direction it wanted to take, and it's the highlight of the series because of it. I had zero expectations going into the show given the track record for live action adaptations, and those expectations became less than zero once the original creators announced their exiting of the show, saying that the creative team at Netflix was unpleasant to work with and disrespectful, but even that announcement doesn't guarantee a failure or awful adaptation. I'm left thinking about The Shining, one of the most influential horror films ever created, and how the author of the original novel, Stephen King, has gone on record saying he doesn't like it. I don't believe that a creator not being a fan of an adaptation of their work is necessarily indicative of the quality of the adaptation. However, The Shining is really an exception to that rule. Usually, it's not a good sign. If the series were to be renewed for a second and third season, I hope they either take more risks with brand new stories and characters that are interesting, or try to better stick to the original and better realize what worked so well with the original. As it stands now, it just feels like a bland, watered down show that isn't really made for anyone. Neither fan nor brand new viewer looking for an interesting fantasy adventure. If you haven't seen the original at this point, you should. It's great. I'm not going to try and convince you that it's a masterpiece or anything like that. It's hard for me to speak about the show from an objective standpoint, as I grew up with it, and I watched it live on Nickelodeon. I remember constantly rewatching the reruns, basically resulting in me having seen every single episode of the series at least 7 to 10 times at this point. I remember the day I watched the series finale with my brothers, when I was less than half the age I'm at now. Oh god, I'm growing old and dying. It's hard to talk about the show objectively, but I think it's pretty close to perfection. However, it's cool if animation isn't really your thing, or you're turned off by the show being made for kids. I could maybe understand, but ironically enough, the original that was intended for primarily children treats the audience with more respect for their intelligence than the darker live-action adaptation. At the end of the day, I feel like the original is just a better story with better characters. Everything else like the animation, music, and voice acting isn't even icing on the cake. It's just more cake. Animation has a stigma against it, with many people, especially Hollywood, not giving it enough credit, and unfortunately the live action series just comes across as another example of people not understanding that animation isn't a genre. It's a medium that's better for telling certain stories, and Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of those stories. If the Netflix show works for you and serves as a potential introduction to the original series, that's great. And despite animation being a better suit for this story, I'm not of the mindset that a great live-action adaptation is impossible, but it's not found here. This won't be the last live-action attempt at a beloved animated property, but hopefully it does at least introduce some viewers to this great story, who can then watch the original. The original series is a work of art, and that art shouldn't be experienced through a confused adaptation that has no fun or subtlety.
That wasn't a good play.
I'll say. No kidding. Horrible. You said it.
But the effects were decent.